Hi guys, welcome to the 21st Century Physio podcast again. Got a huge episode in store. We've got a young entrepreneur physio who's changing the world. I'm really excited to hear about some of the things. It's great to see someone who thinks a little bit differently and looks outside the square of the 3x3 treatment room. And I think Ryan Ebert is the exact epitome of that. So welcome Ryan to the 21st Century Physio podcast.
Thanks, Stephen. You were far too kind to me there.
So, Ryan, you're doing a lot with yourself. There's probably too much for me to sort of rattle off the top of my head. So do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? First, why did you decide to study physiotherapy? And then, what's led you to where you are now, having roles in multiple, large organisations and teaching institutes?
Yeah, so I started actually studying civil engineering when I finished school. Did a year of that and then realised that I wanted to work with people. Realised that I was no good with blood or anything like that, so that pretty much ruled out med. And then having loved sport, I thought, well, let's do physio. So I was lucky enough to do physio over at Curtin Uni back in WA. Yeah. And then I guess fast forward now, I graduated about 6-7 years ago, and as you said, variety of roles. So teaching at Swinburne University in their upcoming course of physio. I manage the therapy businesses and Bupa's physiotherapy strategy in a large company that's only a recent role. Have had a number of physio clinics myself. We have a national occupational physio company that we started 5 years ago that I still have. And so I spend my time between all of that and trying to do other weird and wonderful things.
So for someone who's only been out of university, for 6 or 7 years, yes, I guess?
Something like that.
You've done quite a lot. Okay, let's go one by one through each of those.
Sure.
So first, tell us about your role at Swinburne University, this new course. There's been a lot of talk around Melbourne about the exciting things that are going to be coming out of this course. It's going to hopefully revolutionise the way the physio's taught in Australia. Tell us a little bit about your role and what we've got in store for the program for future students.
Yeah, so we're really excited. So we'll start our course semester 2 this year. It'll be a 2-year intensive master's course. Yeah. So following on from an undergrad degree in the sciences, be it human bio, exercise, phys, or science or something like that. This course that we've really built here, so I've been involved now for 13-14 months as an advisor, an upcoming lecturer, and on the external and internal committees here. What we're doing here is really trying to not just create another physiotherapy course, but actually create a course that tailors a bit more towards private practice industry and a bit more into the community health space. So personally, I think in Melbourne, and having taught at University of Melbourne and knowing a number of people at La Trobe and some of the other unis, I think we have some great physio courses here in Victoria. Yeah. And I think they do wonderful things. Having had some private practices, I think where we struggle a little bit is actually getting clinicians who want to do that private practice setting or that community setting or not go into that hospital setting, I suppose, straight out of uni. I think what we found when we had graduates was their skills were lacking there. And then when we went and spoke to wider members of the industry in that space, that was really, I guess, proven. So what we're trying to do here is tailor a course towards students that have an interest in those spaces and really make ourselves strong there. And also just put our hand up and go, look, if you want to be the best hospital physio, which I think is a fantastic thing to pursue, to be honest, Swinburne's probably not the best course for you, and we wish you the best with applying with the other ones. But yeah, we're connecting with industry here. We're going to have a student placement that'll be an Australian first, that we have some fantastic industry partners here, and like I said, we're just trying to tailor towards that side of the student demographic and marketplace. Yeah.
And what will that placement look like? What's the difference going to be between the other listeners who have been through your more traditional physio course to date?
Yeah, so we're certainly still going to have you go there for 4 or 5 week placements, and we'll have hospital placements. We will have community placements, aged care and that kind of thing. But we've been very fortunate to partner with one private practice organisation here in Victoria, and being Keyser, so Swinburne have a partnership with them, and also a community and aged care organisation being the Physio Co. And we're going to try an innovation around actually week 2 of the students coming here, putting these students in those businesses and following those businesses and progressing the students within those organisations for the 2-year course that they're here. So we're basically immersing them as quickly as we can into industry and giving them exposure for the whole 2 years in that, so that they can see, one, how a business operates, how an organisation operates. As they progress their skill sets with their progression of their physio course, they can then evolve what they're doing with patients and interacting there and actually see a patient journey. So if somebody does come in having a total knee replacement or something like that, and their next 6 months of rehab, the student will actually be able to follow that versus just a 4-week intensive sprint.
Or not so intensive as some of the courses are, I think.
Or supervisionary practices in private practice.
In private practice, in community placements where you don't ever manage or speak to a patient, let alone get hands on or prescribe an exercise. So I think that sounds revolutionary. I'm really excited to see the quality of graduates that are come out of this program. What are some other different things that Swinburne's doing in the program?
Yeah, so that's one of the really exciting things that we're looking at. We are also, building our program infusing technology in it from day one. So we really want to tailor towards where not only physiotherapy is now, but where healthcare is going to be 10, 20 years from now. So we're looking at things such as telehealth. We're looking at things such as e-health, so electronic health. How are we recording patients? How are we using metrics in terms of just data to actually get better outcomes with patients? And how are we just building that into the DNA of the course from day one? So within our mus units, our neuro units, our cardio units. But we also have a specific unit that is just around digital health and sort of what we're looking at there. And we also have some teachings and some learnings in the health services space. So essentially just looking at some fundamentals, which was something that I found when I had, before we sold our clinics, of just students coming out not knowing what is a work cover, what is a TAC, what's a high caps machine, what are all these different models that exist and how we deliver and get, what's a practice management software system, some of the students. So we have a unit actually that's going to tailor towards that, and another unit that's going to tailor towards a bit more just that commercialness of the private practice setting. So what is leadership management, exposing students to industry leaders, and also just developing what I think is a huge learning that needs to happen in any course, no matter what it is, in terms of health, is communication, rapport building, and customer service, because health inherently is a service-based industry, and we do need excellent customer service. Great rapport, great customer service gets your patients buying into the treatment you're giving them, so the adherence goes up, better outcomes, ultimately better patient outcomes and a better run business.
I think that all fits my bias pretty nicely there. You got objective data, I think that's number one. You got the customer service or customer experience, I think they're big things. And technology, traditionally I think us as physiotherapists or physiotherapists in general are probably not the most technologically advanced profession going around. We tend to be a little bit behind everyone. So I'm really excited to see some of these, and I think a lot of that has come down to the education. You go into the hospital environment, we're still writing our notes on paper, it's quite archaic. I think this is going to be game changing. So that's really exciting.
And I think we're blessed with the ability, because we're building a new course from the ground up. If we'd had this course for 10 years, it's very hard to move. And even now that I'm getting exposure with our businesses being a bit larger, or the things that we're involved with, or in a corporate setting, I'm getting much more of an appreciation and an acknowledgement of change, and going, I can see why a hospital that has 5,000 staff can't just flick their fingers and suddenly be electronic, because they're moving a cruise ship of 5,000 people. Whereas when we're in a small business environment, we might be moving a little dinghy of 10 people, and it's easy to quick and change and that sort of thing. So we are blessed building this from the ground up. From day one, I said that we needed to talk to industry, and we have done that, and industry has been very helpful, engaging with us, consulting with us. Our external committee is wonderful of what they're seeing the gaps are. And essentially that's what we're looking at. Ask the students, ask the people that are going to hire the students, because we want students to be employable at the end of this. What the problems are, what the pain points are, and then ultimately it's no different to a startup business. Build a business around that. fix the problem.
And I think the industry's been crying out for, someone to listen to them for a long time too. If you have a look through social media, you have listened back through some of these podcasts, it's been a pretty common theme that they're sort of, finding these skills lacking in those new graduates. So it's nice to see, someone coming from scratch and starts to design that. So I think you guys are doing a great job. Let's talk about your business now. So tell us a little bit more about, you've obviously had your practices, you mentioned your soul, and you've also got your other workplace and occupational health business. So tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, so I've had a fortunate entrepreneurial journey, I guess. So my first job when I moved over, so a one-way ticketed from Perth to Melbourne, just for a change really. And because I go for North Melbourne, so I figured I'd go here.
I knew I liked you. Another Kangaroos. You don't find many Kangaroos fans.
No, we're a small bunch, but we're a passionate bunch.
Must have been when Carey was taking all those marks against Djokovic back in the day.
I did grow up in the 1990s, so absolutely.
Yeah.
We had a good heyday there. Fantastic. Not so much lately. But
definitely not.
Yeah, so sort of graduated, one-way ticketed to Melbourne, and absolutely had a shit house. I'm not sure if I can swear here, but
that's fine.
Absolute shit house of a first job.
Yeah.
I think I was 22 and thrown into 2 private practice clinics, and pretty much gone, you're the physio and you're running these within a multidisciplinary team. No, couldn't get a hold of supervisor. There actually wasn't one. So a really bad first job experience, which then sort of led me down towards a path of a second job, which was in corporate and occupational healthcare. So I originally did want to be the physio for North Melbourne and was lucky enough to do a little bit of work with them, and then realised that I kind of like weekends, so maybe I won't go down the sports physio path. So I went into Oc Health, and unfortunately the second job wasn't that much better than the first one.
Okay.
Although the employer for that one did pay me super and didn't run to Thailand away from the ATO. That's how bad the first one was.
Wow.
But yeah, so that sort of wound me into a path, and then I thought, well, these are pretty bad, so I kind of just will go out and see what I can build myself, because it can't be much worse. And I was fortunate enough to do the Oc Health Level 1 course with the APA, meet one of the trainers facilitators there, which was Dave Hall. So we got together, and then we started a company called PHW Group, which stands for Productive Healthy Workplaces. And 5 years later, we are a national occupational physio company. We do a lot in workplace ergonomics training. Essentially, we try and create office environments to move more, because we know of all the health effects from sitting too much. And we've grown that to 60, 70 odd people around Australia, and been very blessed with that journey, with big corporate clients all the way down to small businesses. Along those 5 years, so I did get an itch back to the clinical side. So a couple of years ago, I got together with a guy called Harry Papagoras. Again, very fortunate to be working with some great people, who is a fantastic physio, especially in the occupational health space. So we sort of all intertwined, having PHW and what he was doing with InjuryNet and WorkSafe, and we created a clinic in Melbourne CBD called Health Logic, and really tailored towards actually changing outcomes with workplace injuries. Some early intervention models. How do we create change in this space? Because it can be a pretty dreary, depressing, tough space. We then scaled that to one in the city. We had one in South Melbourne. We had one in the suburbs. And in January last year, ended up selling those clinics. So, but that was a fantastic experience to build some clinics. So we had physio and psych there, services. And just really learning to go, we do need to tailor a value proposition in what I would say is a very tough game, the clinic game, which I'm sure you can attest to.
Definitely. So what was the value proposition? What was your main point of difference, I guess, tailoring to that market?
Yeah, so we were in predominantly metropolitan areas, but because we had that focus on occupational physiotherapy and occupational health, and essentially dealing with work cover, TAC, a lot of patients that people generally don't want to see, or a number of clinics don't. I shouldn't generalise like that. But basically, we just doubled down on that space with our experience with PHW, going into workplaces, learning their pain points. We went and spoke to companies and said, look, we understand that people will still get injured no matter how good your OHS is and your injury prevention and all that. when they get injured, this is the journey, 4 to 6 weeks to go through some government paperwork. We get all these biopsychosocial factors. Person doesn't come see us as a physio for 8 weeks. And then we're behind the 8 ball, and then we can spiral into all things like that. And there's plenty of evidence around all of this. So the earlier we were intervened, the better. So we looked at not only were patients our essentially clients and customers, but employers were, and how could we go to them and say, when injuries happen, work with us under a couple of innovative models around getting your people in, looking after them, getting them treatment. So we doubled down on that. And it's like anything, because we played so much in the work cover and TAC space, we ended up getting really well at it because we were just focusing on that space. The people that we brought in, we had to bring in the right kind of people that want that work. So we were able to make quite a few inroads in that space and really grow, I suppose, our business with that niche model. And that's where we had a bit of success there, I suppose.
And there's some common things you've seen across all the companies that you work with in that space. Some areas where they've really been lacking, or areas that you think they could definitely improve a lot.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think mental health is where I wouldn't say lacking, but we just don't know yet. So, it's fantastic now that I think there's a better conversation around that. The biggest thing that I found in our space of working in occupational health and still with PHW trying to prevent things and going into places is there's so many more factors than just the injury. So the person might come in having a sore shoulder, neck, might have, a low back problem or something like that. Because of the complexity that comes with, I guess, that workplace involvement as well, and additional stakeholders and then families and then income pressures and all these kind of things, you've really got to take a holistic approach. And I think the companies that prevent injuries well and that look after their people and have fantastic cultures really recognise that. The ones that we've seen not do it too well become very dismissive. So usually not only are we treating an injury problem, but we're also then treating a stakeholder management, whether there's an employee or they feel isolated or something like that. So I think that mental component as a part of our biopsychosocial model that we know is a huge thing, and companies that have supports around that generally do pretty well. Patients that don't, we really need to look at things far beyond just that patients come in with a back pain, and that's where I guess we found a bit of a multidisciplinary approach, and also having the relationship and the liaison with the employer really helpful, creating those communication lines.
Fantastic. I think the multidisciplinary approach, has been proven to be really successful, and it's good to see people embrace it in lots of different environments, not only in your traditional private practice or in your hospital, actually in the workplace as well. So I think that's, a really great space. So speaking of multidisciplinary, probably the dirty word for some physios, insurance companies.
Yep.
Bupa.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before when we were having a coffee that, a few people had started to, get into you a little bit when you started working for Bupa.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit, about your role there, and tell us a bit about, your experience working with one of the big, insurance companies, I guess, because there's often a lot of negative connotations, associations with these type of companies.
Yep.
I'd love to get some insight from you about, what it's actually like on the inside.
Yeah, sure. You're definitely right. When I took a role at Bupa, so I originally took, because I was hesitant to begin with, so I originally took a contract role with them. And now, as of, I guess, November, I've taken over as their, I suppose, general manager or business manager of their therapy businesses, and what they're trying to do in that space. So it can be a bit of a few people have told me that I'm either a corporate sellout or have kind of ridden me a bit hard. I'm excited for the learning in such a big environment, and one of the reasons that I suppose I've stepped more into a board role with PHW, when we sold our clinics, I had a bit of time, and we're involved in some other health technology stuff, but one of the reasons that I wanted to take this was you generally get to play at a bigger level, and I think you can make a lot more change on the inside than you can from the outside. One of the surprising things about Bupa is that, and going back to that analogy around the hospital and turning a ship with 5,000 people, at Bupa you're trying to make change with 20,000 people in Australia. It doesn't happen overnight. And there is a lot of genuine security and governance and all this kind of stuff that exists there, and rightly so, because 5 million members across Australia. You've seen the security breaches with Facebook and all these kind of things. You've got to look after those people. But I suppose what my role is there, and what we're sort of trying to do is actually to improve health and care. That's essentially what the company is trying to do. While some of the things may not seem like that, one of the surprises, and I will openly say there are some frustrations working in a corporate environment that I'm learning, but I would say that's in any massive, major, multinational conglomerate corporate environment. But genuinely, the people that I've met there that work there are trying to help. They are driven by this thing of we are genuinely trying to help and improve health and care there. So that's been a surprise for me, because from the outside I didn't think that may have been the case. They are also a business though, so there's also this thing of we also need to be financially viable, and as all businesses
surprise,
I think
yeah.
do. So I think and I think it's a responsibility of all businesses to do that, because then it creates a bigger ecosystem, stabilizes people in employment and that kind of thing. But I suppose my role at Bupa is to really look at, from the health services point of view, thankfully not in the health insurance point of view, is to look at what is the market offering of therapy, and I guess more specifically physiotherapy, and how can we enhance that space? How can we enhance that offering, not just from a fee-for-service current model of, as you said, the 3x3 clinic room, but how are we looking at it in terms of the macro Australian health system, in terms of the patients that now in hospital, because the pressures that hospitals are facing, patients that may have stayed for 3 weeks are now being turfed out at 2 weeks, and then the expectation is community healthcare will take that. The things that we are doing, I suppose, as a physio industry around what are we doing for wellness, what are we doing to enhance the consumer demand that people are expecting of us. So my role is to basically look at what we're doing as Bupa from that, how that fits into our other health services, so Bupa Dental, Optical, the other stuff that we are involved with. And really the starting point for that is we are looking at the community and disability space. So we've opened a therapy centre up in West Melbourne, here in Victoria, that has been purpose-built to actually give resources to this space, to give resources to those, I guess, consumer groups or customer groups that are, people that are wanting to age healthy and stay away from an aged care centre, stay in the thing, to people that are experiencing disability, to people that maybe are experiencing some chronic pain but don't want a total knee replacement yet. What can we do to these consumers to improve their health and care? So it's exciting in a way, because one of the beautiful things about why Bupa may not be a great thing, being a big corporate company, is that we do have the ability to invest resources into the health space and actually try and build the health ecosystem. And I think that's what we're doing at the moment, with starting with this centre, but then obviously we've got scaling plans and some other plans and those kind of things. But how can we invest into what I think is a space, being the community and disability space, that unfortunately hasn't had a lot of love for a long time? I think anyone that I've met working in that space and now sort of moving in that space, I just think are absolute angels, because they're people, they're therapists that have been working there, under-resourced, in poor clinical environments, with tough patients, and kind of, begging for whatever government funding that happens to get beaten around by, depending on which Prime Minister we have, and by the time this podcast goes out, we might have another one. It's tough. So it is nice that we get to at least try and help be a part of that ecosystem, and put a little bit of investment into that space and try and improve some clinical care there, I suppose.
Yeah, I think a lot of physios are afraid of, what these big insurance companies might do if they actually start to come into the market. I'm probably one that, actually really excited to see what's going to happen in the space as they do. I think there's going to be it's going to keep people accountable. It's going to force everyone in the healthcare industry to lift their game a little bit as well and offer that better customer experience and customer satisfaction. You're going to have to deliver better outcomes for people. And we're not going to be able to get away with those, that physio sits in the room putting in tens on 3 patients at the same time. So we're going to start to get a better clinical outcome, I think, as a result of this. And especially in those spaces you mentioned, they haven't been looked at all until the recent, NDIS funding here in Australia, like disability funding in Australia for the people overseas has come in. It really hasn't been looked at, that market at all. As you said, the people have been under-resourced, overworked, probably struggle. A lot of the people in these situations, obviously, a lot of the time, finances are often an issue and they don't seek care either, and then they end up in a worse place. So how do you think, so coming into that market, I guess, with those population, how's Bupa going to, increase, improve the outcomes, I guess? What do you see as maybe the top, 3 things that they're going to implement to start to help these people?
Yeah, I think the space really needs to look at some innovation and around technology and what we are doing in that space. Looking at things like affordability and accessibility, and that's one of the nice things about being in a company this size is we can look at those kind of things as part of a wider, say, Australian economy, healthcare economy. So how can we create therapy centres that have the resources, have the equipment, but even the one that we've built in West Melbourne, that some of the things that I've been really touched on with the patients that have said is they've come into it, and we have, certainly our entry area does not have a clinical feel at all. I've actually even said we should literally put a barista machine and put a barista there and open up a cafe to West Melbourne and the people walking past as another revenue stream, because it's got a really nice feel like that. And patients have said, this feels great. I feel, really special here. We are able to, the space that we've built there has so much in terms of parking, disability access, and all these little things that are the 1%ers that have really added to I suppose, these patients there. So I think there's things in that space that we can do around resources, first of all, around clinical care in terms of we are building a multidisciplinary centre, so that's why it is therapy. It's not just a physio centre or whatnot. We've got physio, OT, speech pathology. Very soon we'll have psychology as well, and a couple of other specialty services there too. So I think integration of multidisciplinary care is one thing that we can do. Innovation around technology and actually trialling technology and having the resources for us to do that, and then can get that to the market. We're looking at things in telehealth and a few other bits and pieces, so enabling accessibility. And then as part of that accessibility, actually creating spaces and creating environment. And this is what we learn with PHW very well, is that so much of creating somebody, your office employees' movement behaviour actually comes down to the type of office you build, the implementation of sit and stand desks, the simple things around, and we as physios go, oh, well, that's a no-brainer. But surprisingly, you sit in meetings with HR people and they go, that's a genius idea to move the printer to the other end of the room so that people walk. So it's creating environments that make people feel good. So I think those 3 things are I guess, an area that we can help, the sector, I suppose.
So we've talked about a lot of different things today, a lot of different industries. You're doing some big things. What are 3 key things that you think that, someone who's in private practice now, a physio out there, what are 3 things they can do to help bring their practices into the 21st century and, potentially compete with some of these organisations that are coming into the market like Bupa, without giving away any trade secrets, of course?
I won't give away any trade secrets. I will say that we want to be a player in the market. We do not want to crush everyone in the market. So I will preface it with that. But I think
you can all sleep soundly tonight after listening to this. You still have a job in the future.
Exactly. And I think the only way to have a healthy market is to have a healthy competition, cannibalistic competition. But I suppose a couple of things that what I've really been racking and having built some clinics, and that is a tough business. That is a very tough business to be involved in. I think what practices can really do is get clear on who is your consumer. So who are you actually trying to serve? The old junction of build it and they will come and trying to serve everybody just doesn't work, or I don't think it does anyway. And I think by virtue of trying to serve everyone, you end up really serving nobody. So getting really clear on what's the value offering that you are giving somebody that is uniquely yours and doubling down on your brand would be the first thing. Definitely just integrating technology and seeing where things look. I'm not involved in the insurance side. I'm not privy to too much there, but what I can say is more and more, and it's not just the big bad insurers, it is the government, it is the regulators of the healthcare space. The healthcare is the fastest growing sector in Australia in terms of employment. So what is happening more and more is there is an expectation, because we have technology and the ability to use it, that outcome measures are managed, that value-based, if Medibank are going to give us X dollars for something, or if NDIS or if TSE or if any funding body is going to do it, they are going to want to be able to just turn around and go, can you prove it? They're not putting a gun to anyone's head. They're just going, it's taxpayer money. Yeah. We'd like to just make sure that everything's okay. So I think being really good on utilising technology to minimise that busy work and that dead time and that paperwork was probably another thing. Yeah. And one thing that, I'm still trying to work out how to do it, and I'd love to come back into the space of clinics. And I'm looking at ways to do that. But moving away from a fee-for-service model is probably the biggest thing that I try and wrap my head around. And that's not to say that we have to completely disband this fee-for-service model, but what are other revenue streams? What are other diversification strategies that we can use? Is there something around some subscription-based billing, some value-based billing, in conjunction with our fee-for-service? What can we do that is different? Because ultimately, I worry a little with our profession and the things that I've been involved in. And as I said, the clinic game was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever done. Because I see with the fee-for-service model, a couple of things happen if we're not clear on who our consumer is. So Physio A versus Physio B, and they're trying to market to everybody, and they go, well, I make money by fee-for-service. So that's a one-way ticket to burnout, because the only way you can make money is expend time and labour. You sit there and go, well, maybe I should do 4 appointments in an hour at 15-minute blocks instead of 2 at half an hour, which can decrease quality, but hey, it can increase revenue. But then we're moving towards a production line medicine model, which I don't think is very good for our profession anyway. And the worst thing is we can participate in the race to the bottom, which is practice A turns around and goes, well, we're charging $80, and then practice B hasn't gotten their value proposition clear. So they go, okay, we'll charge $75. And then they do $70, and before we know it, we're working for peanuts on the dollar. And at a macro level, we've just undervalued the whole profession. Yep. So I think really getting a bit creative around revenue models and diversifying ourselves and just getting clear on our value proposition, and then just double down on that, I suppose.
I think that's a really good point to leave it there for today. It's also a good point that we're going to kick up on the next podcast. We're actually going to talk about our unlimited.physio model that we've started running in our practice over the last 6 months. It's been a revolutionary way that we've found to generate revenue in our practice, generate a happy and vibrant workplace as well, and go away from some of those restrictions in that model. So I think I didn't pay you to finish on that, but I think it's a really good place to finish, go on to our next model, looking at our unlimited.physio model. So, Ron Ebert, I'm amazed what you've done in the last 6 or 7 years since you graduated. I can't see what you do over the next 6 to 7 years. So, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Stephen.